second of our 9 months together as a cohort. Welcome to the Coalition. We are over 60 congregations and communities across Oregon, learning new ways to steward our land, our people, and our money together so all Oregonians can come home. Many of you know, some of you may be newer to us, but we are a part of a larger movement home we call the Sacred Organizing House. And that house brings together under one roof teams of people of faith and courageous love who are all building a multi-faith, multiracial, and multi-generational movement for justice. We're united by the shared practices that are learning and have learned of sacred organizing. And we're everywhere from youth to Spanish speakers to clergy and faith leaders, spiritual leaders, climate resilience folks, land and housing, reckoning with racism. And so it is good to be doing this work together. Tonight, as we learn together, we are going to continue to walk through the sacred organizing spiral. It's in this spiral we learn how to listen to our neighbors, to ourselves, and to our land, so we can reveal what pressures and dreams and needs are present there, because we want to be able to take action together with integrity. We're building collective power because we want to move out of isolation and into community and to share all of our resources. As I said, our people, our land, our money, our information, our knowledge, so that we can move aside barriers that stop us from making the world as it is into the world we know that it is meant to be. And for us, that means a place where all people have a safe, affordable, and meaningful place to belong and to live. So thank you for being here tonight. This evening in particular, we are going to stay in that sacred encounter part of the spiral, and we'll be learning about a different form of relational one-to-ones. Last month, we learned about sacred encounter and one-to-ones, what it means to encounter, to attend to a person in front of you that you want to learn more about. But tonight we're going to learn about something called deep canvassing, that was dubbed that by the People's Action Network and other organizing. And before you get too nervous about the word canvassing and imagine that you are going to be asked to go out into the world and knock on doors, while this practice was honed on the ground by organizers across the country working toward marriage equality, and they literally did canvass neighborhoods door to door, we're not asking you to do that tonight. We're just using the ideas of deep canvassing and some practices that we learned this spring and summer at 5 congregational core team sites. We're just using it as a platform to talk about how to move people who don't naturally agree with us to perhaps come to understand and think about and act on things that are important to us. Often we start with one-to-ones with people that we know at least a little bit, right? Or who we know already have some shared interest in what we're organizing around. But what we're going to learn tonight, these practices from deep canvassing, will help you feel more confident about how to have deeper, more moving, relational conversations with people who not only may be strangers, but who may not even share some of the self-interest with you around issues that you really deeply care about. So I imagine many of you are frustrated by the world we live in, where we are so polarized and we can't even have any more good conversations about things that matter. So tonight, we hope that we'll teach you some things that you can take into your places that will help you bridge that divide. One of the tricks to this work, as you'll learn tonight, is suspending judgment. I find it a lot easier to judge than not to judge people who are different than me. And I found that suspending judgment requires willingness to give up the sense of security that comes from being certain about something, being certain usually that I am entirely right. Instead, when we suspend judgment, we open up new possibilities for where a relationship might go. And we don't block people off from that possibility. And we can expand who we can organize. And this is what is so important tonight. If we keep organizing the same people over and over again, we will not make a meaningful difference. So tonight we're going to learn about how to organize outside our comfort zone. Somebody who we may agree with on some things, but not everything. Somebody who we agree with on a few big things, but not many others. And I'm just going to say this as I end and we move into the next part. A lot of people in this room, it's important to remember that organizing this way beyond people we are generally comfortable with is a matter of life and death for some of us, literal life and death. And so if we really want to change our world, if we really want things to be different, we have to be willing to organize folks who are not like us, who don't agree with us in every way. It means learning to listen really carefully in new ways. So it means finding out what's important to them. And in organizing, we call that self-interest. So we can figure out where we overlap with them. So that's a long introduction to what we'll be doing tonight, but I hope helpful. And it is what we will be learning tonight. But first, Levita, I'm going to invite Levita Gilmore Jones, one of our organizers and companions and volunteers, longtime organizer actually, to introduce herself and to ground us in the space together as we get going. Levita, thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. I am Levita Gilmore Jones, and I am bringing us a grounding tonight. And I invite you just to take a moment to center yourself, to take a breath. As we arrive tonight, we recognize that there is a lot of conflict all over the world, not just in the Middle East, but in Africa, in South America. You name it, there's conflict going. And tonight, though, we're just going to focus in on the Middle East for a moment. And I'm going to share with you a reading from the author and Sikh activist Valerie Carr. So let us begin. Our most powerful response to the horror in Israel and Palestine is refuse to surrender our humanity. Our most powerful response to the horror is to refuse to surrender to our humanity. You will be told by some the deaths of Israeli children are unfortunate but inevitable because Israel's occupation of Palestine is brutal and wrong. You will be told by others the death of Palestinian children are unfortunate but inevitable because it is the only way to keep Israel safe from terror, and Hamas brought this on its own people. Both will say our aggression is the only response to their aggression. Our fear is more justified than their fear. Our grief more devastating than theirs ever will be. But, oh, my love, the hierarchy of pain is the old way. The moment we allow our hearts to go numb is the moment we shut down our humanity. I don't know the solution to the conflict in Israel and Palestine, but I do know the starting point: to grieve their children as our children. It's the only way to break the cycle. To my loved ones who are Israeli, Jewish, and Palestinian, I see your searing pain. I love you and grieve with you, and am reciting my ancestors' prayers for protection as you search for your families and bear the unbearable. May love find you through the impossible. And to all of us witnessing this story, what does love want you to do? If you cannot look at the news and the images, it's okay. Step away, be with the earth, go to the trees, let them breathe through you. Remember that you don't need to do all the things, just the one that's yours to do. If you want to help but don't know how, begin in relationship. Who in your life is hurting from this? Offer to walk with them, listen to them. There is no fixing grief, only bearing it together. Only then do we know what to do next. If you are falling apart, your breathlessness is not a sign of your weakness, but of your strength, of how deeply you feel the horror, how deeply you care. You still feel, and that matters in a world that wants us to feel nothing. Who can feel it with you, breathe with you? Opening our hearts to grief, others, and our own is how we hold our humanity in a world that would destroy it. It's how we will begin to survive this. Take a breath in. And now I give you Mary Ann.
Thanks, Levita. My name's Mary Ann Barham. This is the third year I've been involved with the Land and Housing Coalition, primarily as a companion to core teams, but also on the core team at First Unitarian Church. I do this work because I'm passionate about social change, but also because I've been significantly changed by my experiences over the last few years. And I'm going to share a personal story about an experience I had last spring doing deep canvassing. So last April, I had the opportunity to do deep canvassing at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in North Portland. And at this point, I'd like to acknowledge that the rector at St. Andrew's is present tonight. And unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to do this story together, even though I quote her at the end. St. Andrews was planning to use the church property to set up a tiny home village with We Shine, an organization in Portland that had successfully built other tiny home villages. Neighbors had heard about the plans, and we knew there were concerns. This was my first experience with deep canvassing, and I was eager to learn more about the process. I had done political canvassing in the past, primarily get out the vote activities, or we only knocked on doors of people who were considered likely to support a candidate or an issue. And I've also knocked on doors for organizations I support. I was eager and anxious to expand on those experiences by knocking on doors of people that I didn't know about issues I was passionate about, offering more housing options in Portland. I also hope to have conversations that were richer and more personal when the goal was not to persuade, but primarily to listen. And I know myself well, and I am a very curious person, so I always like to hear more about people. I and my partner were assigned the block directly next to the church. After a brief training on deep canvassing, we left the church with our script, our materials, and we headed down the block. The script asked that we engage primarily with people who were considered the movable middle. When we asked them the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you sit if 1 is vehemently opposed and 10 is totally supportive? The movable middle were the 4 to 8s. And if we had people who were vehemently opposed, we should say, thank you very much for your time, and we should move on to the next house. The first resident we met was extremely upset about the tiny home village and was a 1 on the scale. And she wanted to share her reasons with us. At this point, I felt ready to go off script because I was really curious to learn more. It also felt somewhat disrespectful to just leave when she wanted to talk to us. So she stayed, we stayed, and she shared her concerns. And one of the ones that was most obvious was that she was really upset that this was a low barrier housing option and it would allow people to use drugs in their private tiny homes. And we listened and we shared some information, but we didn't try to change her mind. And as we left, I wished that I had asked her more follow-up questions about why she was so fearful about heroin use, because she told us we didn't understand how heroin impacted people. And I still wish I would have asked her that question. But we continued down the block and around the corner, knocking on doors, asking questions, sharing information, and listening. We found all the people we talked to extremely opposed to the tiny home village. Their anxieties and fears varied from concerns about drug use in their neighborhood to more tents and trash that might accumulate, and fears for their children who had to walk past the tiny home village to get to school. Sometimes we suggested they reach out to Jennifer, who was the rector, and at times we shared Jennifer's number. It was also challenging not to minimize their concerns and to offer lots of opinions and facts to try to change their mind. During many of these conversations, I noticed people soften, really visibly soften in their body as we listened to them. And we shared Jennifer's contact information and gave them handouts. This wasn't the case, though, on the house we knocked on, where we had a conversation through the people's Ring doorbell as they sat at the veterinary clinic with their dog. That was the most interesting. But it also confirmed my belief that face-to-face interactions are key to the work we're doing, and even more broadly, that our physical presence is essential. In addition to my regret about not asking more follow-up questions, I also regret I was unable to attend any of the community conversations that were held after I deep canvassed, and that I was less involved and unable to participate in their project as they move forward. So a few days ago, when Jennifer got back from vacation, I reached out to her via email, asking if she thought deep canvassing had changed any of the neighbors' views. She replied that some of the neighbors who were really opposed started coming to community meetings, asking questions, getting answers, offering feedback, and slowly forming friendly relationships with folks at St. Andrews and We Shine. Jennifer also said it felt significant to her that now she knows names of people who live on the block and they know her. So, I'm supposed to hand it over to Jules now.
Thanks, Marianne.
Sure.
Marianne, your story is such a perfect example of how conversations where we show up vulnerably. I know you shared your own stories during those conversations with people at their doors, right? I know it's such a perfect example of how these conversations can move us. You were clearly moved, as well as the people you talk to, and into thinking in new ways. And I know you acted in new ways afterwards too, right? Like you were changed because you did that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I know I've heard you talk about that. And I noticed, like, in a world that's split apart by difference, we really do need to find ways to bridge those differences to make progress on what matters to us. So thanks to everybody who's done those conversations. Marianne, thank you for doing them over the spring and summer. And I want to talk a little bit more about what it means to do what Marianne just described, to show up to someone and to listen so deeply to them that without even trying to influence what they think, you can move them. You can move them in their hearts and move them in their bodies. So the last time we gathered, we learned and practiced how to engage in encounter through relational one-to-one meetings. Some of you were here for that and might remember Many of you probably practiced them this month, and I'm going to ask you later how that went. I do hope you took the opportunity to practice in your congregations or in your communities this month with folks you're curious about. And I really hope that you shared what was important to you and why you do this work. And I want to say this out loud in case people are uncertain. You can share and should share your own self-interest when you're having one-to-ones. You are not a blank slate, and those conversations should be mutual. What you feel passionate about matters. And in organizing, we most often meet and hear stories of people's lives and the pressures that they're feeling or the tensions that they're feeling through one-to-ones and house meetings. So tonight we're going to talk about some other tools. We'll learn about house meetings later in the winter. But we need to move beyond first the people that we're initially comfortable with if we really want to change the world. I said that earlier and I want to repeat it. We have to move beyond who we are initially comfortable with, like Marianne did, like the folks at St. Andrews did, if we really want to change our world. Because if we want to build something that matters and is larger than just the 60 people on this screen or the folks that we're in touch with already, beyond the usual suspects, we're going to have to move from a collective state of despair to a growing sense of possibility. And that takes more of us. That takes a lot more. So how do we do that? Some of you are like, okay, Jules, fine. How do we actually get there? So to me, sacred organizing means that it doesn't just matter if we win on issues or solve problems. It means that what I do out in the world, when I'm having these conversations, when I'm trying to move people, my values are at stake too. It means that how we organize matters as much as who and what we organize for. How we organize matters as much as who we organize and what we organize for. So it means that when we approach building power in our congregations and our neighborhoods around land and housing, we start with three things in my mind: the honor, the dignity, and the curiosity that we have about other people. So other people's honor and dignity and our curiosity. What it means is allowing other people to express themselves and help them then to connect their heart with their actions. And often when we do that, people see that their heart and their actions are out of sync. It also means that we have to show up with our own stories, because only when I show up as human can I affect the person that I'm talking with. Otherwise, I'm just a two-dimensional figure that doesn't have anything to offer. And it also means that I have to move. This is very hard for me, by the way. I'm going to confess that this is something I'm not very good at in my daily life. I have to move beyond you're opposed to me, so you must be unmovable and wrong, to the vast majority of people are decent human beings who care about other people, and we can figure out how to do something together. How many of you, maybe you raise your hands, maybe you say it in the chat, have trouble with the same things that I just named? Anybody else? Yeah, I'm seeing like so many hands. We're all in that space, right? We all struggle with judgment and with wanting to be right. So in organizing, what we call self-interest is where we're trying to go. In organizing, when we have these kinds of conversations, we call it discovering somebody's self-interest. And all that means, everybody has self-interest. You have it, I have it. Your mom has it, your children have it. Self-interest is just something you care enough to act on. That's it. Self-interest is something you care enough to act on. And so the way we discover somebody's self-interest is to get curious about them. I said we start with dignity, honor, and curiosity, because everybody's life is a mix of experiences, right? There are so many things about each one of you that just looking at you, I could never guess. I could never guess the many adventures and experiences you've had. And what makes me think that if I had the same experiences, I'd behave or see the world any differently than you? There's no evidence that I would. It seems like most people's worldview is just the natural outcome of their accumulated experience. And so we can honor that. You are who the world made you to be. So we just have to get curious about this to understand the why. Why do you act this way? Why do you believe this way? What formed you this way? So I'm going to invite you to start with yourself. It's easiest for me if I start practicing on myself before I go and inflict this on a different person. So I want you to think about your own story, especially your own story about the housing crisis or pressures around housing and land. What moved you to act on housing justice? What made you feel this way? Is there a story, a person, your own experience? Now I want you to turn your mind to another person in your life who you haven't talked to about this. Maybe you haven't talked to them about it because you're worried about what they'd say. Maybe you just haven't had the opportunity. And I want you to intentionally suspend judgment about them and ask yourself, what's their experience with housing justice? What's their experience with pressures around housing? Do I know anything about that already? What do I not know? And then ask, what's important to this person? That's the starting with curiosity. What's important to them? Don't assume that we know what's important to them. I've been in so many meetings, neighborhood meetings in particular, where the same thing comes up over and over and over again. Why do we not want this to happen here in our neighborhood, near my house, on the street next to my child's school? Trash, crime, you probably list the same list that I do. But it's almost never actually about those things, is it? It's actually about security or an experience. Like Marianne said, I wish I'd asked what this woman's experience with heroin addiction was. Why is she so opposed to this? It seems like it's bigger than just being opposed to the tiny home village. So start with curiosity. And then finally, and this is the most important one, is enter into the conversation willing to change your own mind, willing to have that other person's experience change you. Because unless you show up ready to change or willing to, at least, they're going to know that you're just there to change them. And nobody likes a conversion. Nobody likes a forced conversion, right? So show up ready to change yourself. Okay. Thanks, Lavita. So it's okay to want to change somebody's mind about something important to you. You're allowed to have that opinion. You're allowed to have something that you're passionate about. We organize because we want change. But you have to be willing to also change. Otherwise, we're not honoring another person's dignity. And I know we're going to get to an exercise in a minute, but I want to say this first. You're probably wondering why we can't just convince people to agree with us, given the huge amount of facts that support what we're trying to do. And clearly, you all agree, we need affordable housing, right? We need places for people to belong where they feel safe and secure and can afford to be there and raise their children and care for elders and be able to be employed and sleep well, right? We agree, but people don't necessarily agree with us. And we can't solve this problem unless we can listen long enough to understand why. So I want you to think about the last time you changed your mind about something important because someone told you that you were supposed to change your mind. Anybody who came up with one right away, please put it in the chat. I'll wait. Yeah, I think that's probably that sound of crickets you're hearing is because we don't change our minds because somebody told us that we're wrong. Research actually shows the following. It shows that facts and figures, arguments from an opinion, actually statistically have no persuasive change whatsoever. They result in no impact on the other person. You can argue all day long about what's right and wrong based on facts and numbers and figures and data, and you will not change the other person's mind. So you can keep trying and waste your breath. What we do know, though, is that when we share our stories and personal experiences, what we feel, there is change, but it's short term. It doesn't last. So it's good, it changes somebody's opinion for a moment, but then it fades away. When we share our own stories, how we feel, and the other person gets to share their story, and those stories interact, so how we feel and how they feel together, then we end up with lasting persuasion just by sharing stories that matter to us both. This should be revolutionary. I hope that you all are very, very shocked by this. I was shocked by this. It is so important that we notice that when we share our own stories and what's important to us, other people get to share their stories, then actually we change. We all change. What we need to realize, though, is the problem is every person's life is a mix of experiences and values that motivate them to act a certain way, right? Like I'm made up of a bunch of pieces and parts. And some of those experiences and pieces and parts are at odds with each other. In fact, there are parts of my story that conflict, and I end up not sure what to do. So I choose an easy path, or I choose the one that will be most secure for my family, right? So I want to give you an example from my own life. You see, there I am. That's me at breakfast with my spouse a couple of months ago. And Lavita's going to press a button and a bunch of words in English and Spanish are going to come up on. And I want you to take some time to absorb them. These are parts of me. These are things that motivate me. These are things that make up how I make decisions about the world. So go ahead and take a moment and absorb what you can. Okay. Now I want you to look at these and see if you can find any that maybe have conflicting interests. Maybe there's some things on here that they're true about me, but if I had to choose between some things politically or socially or culturally, they might put me in a little bit of a bind. And if you find one or you think of one, even if it's a guess, you can get it wrong. It's okay. I put myself out here on purpose tonight, friends. I'm fair game. If you think of one, go ahead and put it in the chat. Where do you see, like, what are the two things you might like go, oh, maybe she struggles because those are both true about her. You can make up stories about me too. It's fine. If you're like, I think I'm assuming. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for going first. Military family and a progressive Christian. Sure. Employed full-time and chronic illness. So military family and progressive Christian, what I'm hearing, Allison, is like, sometimes there's some perception that like folks who are deeply military families are more conservative, progressive Christian, maybe war and peace might be in conflict for me, and moral values around what that means. Employed full-time and chronic illness, Jennifer says, yeah, because like I deeply value my health insurance, and the system makes me, I need it, I have to have it, but I'm trapped in my job because our systems tie our insurance, our health coverage, our health and well-being to employment. Yeah, married and childless, like that probably puts some tension in my life, right? Thanks, Laurel. Lives next to a mass camp and friends and family with experience of houselessness. Absolutely. I live next to the Clinton Triangle, which is the first mass camp in Portland, and am part of my neighborhood association, which deeply opposed it being placed next to our neighborhood. I strongly support camping. I deeply don't support the way that that mass camp was put in place. So in some ways, I'm like a NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard, but also I have some complex reasons for that. Ooh, it's a lot of tension. Homeowner in Portland, lives next to a mass camp, military family, lives next to a mass camp. Like there's like the structure stuff in there, sexual violence experience, And then fear of stranger. Who are these people who are next to me? I don't know what I should be afraid of. Yep. You all are really good about this. You are really good at this. Homeowner, friend, houseless, sexual violence, married. Awesome. Nailed it. Okay. So, oh, Midwest and rural Portland resident. Thanks for naming that, Aaron. There is some conflict in there. There's some cultural differences that put me in a pickle. And Midwestern and childless by choice. Good job, guys. Okay. So I want you to take those same thoughts. This is very well done. Levita, please keep this up for a minute. And I want you to now name in the chat, what are the systems behind some of these? So for example, one of you named military and progressive Christian. There's institutions behind those two things. What are the systems or institutions that are pressing in on me because of who I am? Go ahead and name those. And they could be from any one of these categories that I listed. Capitalism, yep. Have to have a job in order to be healthy. The VA, yep. The US military is the largest and strongest, most well-funded military in the world. Religious institutions and the church, yep. Tied into political systems. I didn't say what party I'm a part of, but those are pressing in on me all the time. Lack of good healthcare in the US, so the healthcare system. Cultural norms to have children. Absolutely. Thank you for naming that. Anything else? There's a lot on this sheet. White supremacy culture. Thanks, Grace. Yeah. Stigmas around chronic illness. Yeah, so like my health, my job, my family, my children or lack of children, my political beliefs, my religious beliefs, all of these things are totally in tension. They're totally in tension. And if we were really taking the time tonight, you could probably find lots more. I want you to think about what it is that your map would look like. These are my self-interest, and they're complicated. I want you to think about if you had your face up here, what you would list. The reality is, this is me. This isn't all of me, but it's a lot of me. And I am not in conflict in myself. These are all important things about me. But the systems behind these things make me choose what's important to me. And they limit my choice, right? They limit my choice. So when we are finding people's self-interest, we have to understand that they are dealing with the same kinds of conflicts. And it's really helpful, especially with people we don't already know, to go into that deep canvassing work or that self-interest identification work, identifying people's self-interest really swiftly in a way where your story and theirs can find common ground, because you can't get around all of this. You cannot get around all of this. It is the iceberg under the water, right? And on a literal level, we've practiced this and learned some things about it over the last year. I said that deep canvassing was a technique that was developed during the movement for marriage equality about a decade ago. And just in Minnesota, some of you who like facts and figures will like this, over 200,000 conversations were had by 14,000 organizers just in Minnesota over the course of a season. And these 10 to 20 minute conversations had one purpose: to do what Marianne described, measure where somebody is on a scale, share a deep interpersonal conversation in which both people shared their personal stories, and then at the end of it, see if the person had moved on the scale, up or down. And what they found was they were able to pass marriage equality simply having these conversations without really trying to persuade anyone of anything. So the question is, why does this work? Why is it that we're talking about this tonight? Because when we're doing sacred organizing, we are honoring, when we do it this way, we are honoring people's complexity. We are honoring their intersections. We are honoring their diverse values. They have them. We all do. We're honoring that they are suffering and struggling under the many systems that are pressing in on them, like the ones you listed for me. And by moving beyond facts and into feelings, We allow people to change their minds, not because of shame or blame or because we're manipulating them, but because we give them room to face with a story, our face, and then to process their own stories in an empathetic and curious way. So this gives people the motivation to move from one position to the other and to have new perspectives, to move aside their protective walls. We know we can't change everybody's mind, but we can at least have better dialogue and be more humane and learn about what's important to people so we can have better conversations. For those of you who want to build housing on your church land, these kinds of conversations is how you get there. It's how you move a community. So here's your assignment this month. You're about to watch one of these conversations, so you're going to get to see it in action. I promise. Janelle and Josh are about to show you. But your assignment this month, I hope, is to have one conversation, at least one like this, about something you care about that you think people should act on. Who do you know who you think might be a movable middle, that 4 to 8 that Marianne described, on that thing that you care about? You start with curiosity, start with your own self-interest, map yourself like I did. Try that for yourself. And then I encourage you to write out a little bit of a story to help guide you as you're thinking, why is this important to me? What happened? Keep it simple, keep it personal. It only needs to be a few sentences. We're going to send this out to you, so you'll have these questions to work with, and just find a way to engage in one conversation like this. One conversation where you've looked at your own self-interest and you're willing to think more creatively and empathetically about why somebody else is where they are. So as we're witnessing Josh and Janelle, I encourage you to take notes. What do you notice? Where do you see their self-interests showing up? What's moving either of them to act? And when we come back, you're going to go into a one-to-one and get to talk to somebody about what you saw. And then we'll come back and talk to one another more largely. So with that, Josh and Janelle, are you ready?
Hello.
Hi, I'm Janelle. I'm from Covenant Presbyterian just down the church. And I'm out here talking to neighbors because within our own church, we've been hearing a lot about the housing crisis, seeing our neighbors leave because they can't afford housing, and even the houseless camps just down the street. And I want to know a little bit more about your thoughts and opinions. Do you have a quick 3 to 4 minutes to have a quick conversation?
Sure.
Awesome. What's your name?
My name's Josh.
Hi, Josh. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Janelle.
Yeah, that's also my pastor's name.
Oh, cool.
He's cool sometimes. So I know I talked a little bit about, I'm talking about the houseless camps and then seeing our neighbors leave because they can't afford housing here in our area anymore. And also just like the housing crisis in general. When I talk about or say housing crisis or houselessness, what comes to mind for you?
Why isn't the city and the county doing more?
Yeah.
That comes to mind. I start to think about too the RVs parked under the overpass at 148th and 162nd. The RVs and the tents on Halsey Boulevard and Sandy Boulevard. You know, just the bombardment that I have as I drive across East County from home to work and back.
So you see it on a daily basis when you come just living in the area.
Yeah, I mean, inundated with it. You can't ignore it. It's there.
Yeah. Have you or someone you loved ever experienced houselessness or housing pressures?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, that's been something that we've struggled with in my family. Yeah, we've had people in my family that close to me, you know, siblings and who have struggled with it. Yeah.
That sounds like a sensitive topic. I heard your voice change and I want to respect your boundaries, but do you mind telling me a little bit more about that? If you're comfortable.
Yeah, I think my experience has been that if you have any particular things that make you outside the straight and narrow norm, it can really diminish your possibility of finding stable housing. So my younger sister has Down syndrome,
Mm.
And in trying to become an independent person and get her own housing, she's had a lot of barriers. Hasn't been able to keep regular work that can pay for it. The services, this Social Security that she's eligible for doesn't pay enough to actually afford housing within the Portland area. The waiting list for getting into supportive housing that can be helpful for somebody with disabilities is multi-year long to get into it. And on top of that, many landlords and things just don't understand and how to interact with people with disabilities, even when they're high functioning. So there's been a lot of struggle and barriers with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. How, as you think about your sister and what you named at the beginning that you see on a regular basis, just driving to and from work, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel pretty frustrated. I think I look and hear the news about, record profits by, billionaires and corporations. And then I look at the people in my neighborhood and I go, I don't see where those profits are going to help people. And I look at this and I go, there's something wrong here, and I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. So I'm out here talking to folks today, one, because I want to get to know our neighbors a little bit more, right? And two is, even though I'm part of the church, I really, really care about housing and people's housing experiences. This is something that's really touched me since I was young. And I've never noticed how much my family talks about it in a really subtle ways. You talked about your sister and how hard it is to find housing, and then also like help to find housing and affordable housing and the long wait lists for it. And I think people forget that it's not just, it's for everyone, right? There's long wait lists for everyone, right? And I think people think of very specific situations that actually could affect anyone at any time. Most Americans don't have savings, where if we have something traumatic happen, we don't have savings to rely on to get a new apartment or a down payment. When I was in second grade, my house the townhouse that we were living at the time with my family burned, and we had nowhere to go and we didn't have any savings. And so we were literally houseless for 3 to 4 weeks. We were living in a hotel. And that was really, really hard. And I remember the gift that I got was a teddy bear. And I was so mad that I had gotten that teddy bear, because I'm like, I can't afford, like, I don't have anything. My parents, we don't have housing. I wish these $20 that went towards me and my brother for a teddy bear went towards paying for an apartment for me and my parents to live in. But the wait lists were also really, really long. That was a really hard time, even for me, but recognizing that in second grade, that was really difficult. And as I asked you, like, how did that make you feel when you think about your sister and what you see on a regular basis from your commute? I still feel really frustrated with that story. Like, I haven't settled in with it, because I've realized this problem still continues today. Right? I graduated college already, and that happened to me when I was in second grade. And if our apartment burned, we'd be in the exact same situation all over again. So thank you for sharing that with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing with me.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that I told you we'd have a quick conversation, but I was just wondering that in the future, we're still having these conversations, but we're moving towards having maybe a house meeting or a gathering with folks that are sharing these stories that are surfacing. And I was really moved by your story. Would you be willing in the future to have conversations with us as a community around what we could potentially do around housing and housing injustice?
Yeah, I think depending upon the time, looking at my schedule and thinking about it, I would be, interested in that. Yeah.
Awesome. So you're comfortable with me reaching out again? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Josh. It was really nice meeting you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Janelle, for knocking on my door.
Yeah. Seen. Thank you, Josh. Also, thank you for having that conversation with me. It would have been really awkward if you didn't open the door or if you told me no at the beginning. So thank you all for hearing into that conversation and holding our very real stories. Like those are really real stories for me and Josh. So now we're going to practice our own one-on-one conversations around deep canvassing. And as you can see, we did a portion of deep canvassing. There was only parts and pieces missing from like a traditional script. But what a deep canvassing should look like is a really deep one-on-one conversation, a relational conversation that goes back and forth. So now in a few moments, we will all be organized and put into groups of 2, and you will have about 10 to 12 minutes to answer the questions that Jules just put in the chat. So as you think about mine and Josh's conversation, is where were our self-interests? What was our driving fear and our hopes and our curiosities? What self-interests do you share? Do you have a story you would have shared in the conversation to build a bridge of self-interest? So just think of those conversations. They're in the chat. Yeah, and then we're going to break out into groups.
All right, friends, I think we've got almost everybody back with us. So I'd invite you to just take a moment to breathe. Maybe invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that. And take a moment just to reflect back into the conversation you just had. And I'm going to put back in the chat the questions that you were working with. So in case you lost them, you have those. Great. Welcome. Welcome back. Okay. So we're going to spend some time harvesting from your discussion. Feel free to raise your hand. This is a time for conversation. If you think better out loud, feel free to virtually or physically raise your hand and we'll talk that way. Or if you want and more comfortable in the chat, that's okay too. I'll read it out loud. But what did you notice about self-interest in Janelli and Josh's conversation? What did you and your partner wrestle out from there? Oh, Nora, what are you seeing? What did you talk about?
Hello. I noticed that, I just really liked that how they felt comfortable to be able to, Josh and Janelli were comfortable by sharing their story with, the whole group. And I thought, that took a lot of confidence, and I really respected that. It takes a lot of confidence to be able to, share your story for a group of, 60 people. And, in my breakout room, we talked about, how they have experience with, family members who experience houselessness. I'm not on the streets, but I'm kind of experiencing that firsthand currently. My parents are going through a divorce. And so my dad and I are living with my dad's mom, my grandma. So, I'm not on the streets, but I am experiencing some kind of houselessness, and it's difficult.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's the kind of houselessness that's less visible, right? And so I imagine that there's some pressures on you that other people don't even know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
I noticed that Janelli and Josh got more comfortable. They know each other well. I know they were play acting a little bit, but not really. Like I noticed that after Josh shared his story, Janelli was able to share hers, and Josh's body softened. He got more receptive. Did anybody notice anything else in that process of that conversation? What did you see or notice about the way those two people talk to each other? Yeah, Ellen, what did you notice?
One of the things that really impressed me in that conversation was the comment that anything outside of the norm makes you susceptible to houselessness. Anything, so I think that that's really kind of how they connected. Different things that they had, but them being outside of the norm. And the disability in the sister, and it just I just felt like that was a really telling thing for me. The other thing that kind of made me took me back a little bit was the term when Josh said that it was like a bombardment. That's a very physical kind of reaction to visualizing to the houselessness problem. So those are the two things that I thought were helped with the connection, and also helped to understand another's feelings.
Yeah. And Janelli followed up on that word bombardment fast, right? She said something like, oh, that must be that, like, it seems like there's a lot coming at you, or she kind of responded and affirmed.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with him for having a reaction, right? Yeah. Thank you so much. What a great observation. Yeah, their stories don't have to be the same in order to relate to each other. I see in Grace in the chat saying, notice the gentleness in Janelli as she read Josh's body and nonverbal communication and recognized that the subject might be sensitive for him. Good. And she didn't ignore his nonverbal reaction, but pressed into it. Right. So she didn't like read it and say, oh, I should back off. She said, oh, I can probe, but I can do it with kindness. And I can make sure that he hears that I'm doing that with a good intent. Yeah. I'm seeing Irvin saying Janelli was really good at listening and waiting to share her story. So hard to wait and really listen. Irvin, you're not alone. It's really, who else has hard time waiting? I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say, right? As somebody else is talking sometimes. Thanks for that. Anybody else have an observation maybe about what was pressing in on Josh or on Janelli, those systems we talked about with my story, or maybe those pieces you're like, oh, Josh said this about himself. That's something that he attaches some meaning to. Anything you noticed about self-interest? I know you didn't have much time with them, but I know that they came up. For example, I noticed that Janelli's family is a really big part of her story. And true for Josh too, but Janelli's sense of housing is about my whole family and not just me. And when I experience houselessness or pressures on housing, it's about all of us. It's about multiple generations of us. That was really clear to me. Anything else you notice? Take a risk. You can be wrong. Nora saw that as well. Great. The bombard.
Yes, Cheryl from Ainsworth.
Yeah, Cheryl. Thanks, Levita.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I think was self-interest for both of them was when Josh spoke about his frustration, and I think he was talking about the forces of capitalism and how that is such a pressure for people under those circumstances. And I think that was sort of re-echoed by or echoed by Janelli when she talked about the teddy bears and how, that's like putting a Band-Aid on a amputation.
Yeah, that's such a powerful part of her story, right? So poignant. When you think about the capitalism and that story that Janelli told about the teddy bear, were there any other institutions that you noticed were involved in that, or did you notice any other things that were pressing in?
Well, I think he was talking about his sister's disability and how long the wait lists were for any kind of housing accommodations for her.
Yeah. So the housing system itself is part of the problem that both of them noticed. Absolutely.
And probably that goes hand in glove with the mental health system as well, or disabilities, however that's categorized. I'm new to this area, so I'm not quite clear.
Yeah.
Ms.
Good observations. Thank you. So getting at somebody's self-interest like Josh's, we're going to have to think about how do we attach this meaning that he's making around his sister, around mental health, around physical ability and disability. Like if we want him to move on something, it's going to have to touch that part of him. It's going to have to touch that really, really tender part of him that he cares so much about. And for Janelli, same thing. We have to find that thing that's like, that's just really personal for her. And if we don't organize around that piece of her life, she might not be as attached to it. She might not care enough about it to act on it, right? That's self-interest. Care enough about it to act on it. So good job, y'all. Anything else you're seeing or hearing? Mental health system. Yep. Very much. Anyone else? Patricia, was that you or you were just changing your iPad? Okay.
I was gonna say something.
Go for it, Nora.
Okay. About the mental health system. I have noticed that, they try as hard as they can, to help people, but that's honestly not enough. The amount of mental health issues in just the state of Oregon alone is huge. It's more than the state can handle. And I understand that, resources might be really, spread thin, but I feel like that maybe, I don't know if this is going to sound rude or not, but like maybe they need to put in some more effort to, make sure that, of course, not everybody is going to get treatment all at the same time, but I feel like that they could maybe increase the number of people getting treatment. Not just a couple people at a time. I feel like they should increase it to, like 50% of people are getting help.
Yeah.
Whereas, instead of just 20%, they can increase it to like 50%, and that would help a lot.
Nora, it seems like you just pulled together a campaign for us to work on. Right? As friends, we'll learn about issue cuts and how to figure out how to move things later in the year a little bit. But what Nora just is along those lines. So good job. Well done. Good organizing.
Thank you.
I want to ask you all a harder question. So think back to what your stories were with your partner and what stories they shared with you about what was important to them. Underneath those stories are values, right? We can tell stories about facts and about people, but we care for other reasons. We care because we value integrity, or because we care about equity, or we're motivated by the need for security or safety, right? Those are all values. In your conversation with your partner, what values came up? What did you hear? They may not have said them out loud as those words, but what could you interpret from the things they were saying were important to them? And or maybe to Janelli and Josh, you might have some ideas about that conversation as well. Vocation, doing meaningful work, wanting to do meaningful work. Thank you. What else came up? You can say them out loud on mute and say them, or you can put them in the chat. Feel free to do either thing. Justice, equity, fairness. Yes. Thank you. Oh, connection. No one should be doing this alone. That's important to somebody. No one should have to do this alone. It's important enough to me to act on it. Safety at school. Good. Importance around kids and safety and what that means for gun violence. Honoring and respecting each other's story. Oh, our system should work for everybody, not just a few. So again, that equity, fairness kind of value. things around what we value and who we value. So somebody, Judy, your partner or your conversation was about, like, how do we decide what and who we value? Oh, equity around space in our homes. Good. People being seen as human and being treated as a person. You know, it's interesting because some of these are like big, lofty, abstract values, but they're attached to storytelling. They're attached to real experience. They're not just an idea, right? They have a person's face or name attached to them. And so I think when we're doing organizing, when we're having these conversations, it's really important that we remember that. We're not doing this because of justice only. We're doing this because of Nora. We're doing this because of my nephew Keaton. We're doing this because of Josh's sister, right? We're doing this because of Janelli. So let's really remember that when we're telling these stories, we want to get specific and really take the opportunity to tell stories that are about people and about ourselves. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Chris in a second. But first, I want to ask y'all to do something in the chat again. I want you to tell me if you had one-to-ones this month, how many you had, or scheduled, because sometimes they take a minute. If you scheduled one-to-ones or had one, go ahead and either show me your fingers on the screen like Nora just did. Good job. I saw your one. Or I see, yep, I see people. Melissa ran out of fingers. She was just flashing. Tabor Heights, 2. Awesome. Good job, y'all. I see people with 4, 5, 6. I see Marianne with 6. Nice. Levita's had 3, 2 from Diane. I'm seeing all sorts of numbers. Y'all, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Those are all conversations that matter. And I hope that your conversations this month can be even more powerful because of the work we did this month. And I would invite you, as you're having these kinds of conversations, to try to even have more this month. So good job. All right, Chris, what do we have coming up for us this month?
What do we have? And I believe you have a slide coming up. The cohort meets first of every month. And so December 7th. And so it'll be at 6:30. And we'll be learning about sacred encounter through land and ancestral stories. Like expanding beyond people right in front of us, but through the land and through who's come before us. And so that'll be, really fascinating and moving and will help us in our organizing. And you have homework for this month. The homework is to map your own and at least one other person's self-interest using, there's a worksheet that is linked in the chat or is about to be linked in the chat. And don't worry, it'll also be sent out an email to all who are registered. So it's a helpful worksheet that lays out self-interest. So that'll be your homework there. So please do that. And basically having a deep canvas kind of conversation with someone. And your first practice could even be with the one-to-one you had this evening. So that worksheet will be very helpful. And then you'll see it says November 3rd. There is an important presbytery vote on Barbie's Village. So many of you all have been on the journey with us, with Levin, with the Westminster core team, with Future Generations Collaborative, in regard to this beautiful and amazing vision that's been a gift for all of us of the church, the Presbyterian Church, giving land back to indigenous folks so that these particular folks can build a tiny home village for unhoused families and children and an early childhood center. It was so moving for many of you who came to the prayer vigil on Monday. Just moving for me personally as someone and for Melissa too, I would imagine. We've been so invested in this for, oh gosh, like 2 years. And so tomorrow is when the presbytery, the many leaders throughout Western Oregon, Southern Washington, and a little bit of Northern California to say yes to land back, to say yes to repair, and to say yes to roofs over children's heads. And so we would love your prayers and good vibes and loving text messages and all the above. And I believe in the chat, you'll see that the Presbytery meeting is live streamed. I know we stream so many things in our lives, right? Like the new Barbie movie, for episodes of Friends, and what better way to spend your Friday night but to log on at 3:30 for a few hours? No, but in all seriousness, anyone who has the time to witness, that is huge, so that the Presbytery knows that so many folks are being inspired by this, and that yes will have ripple effects. So thank you. And I invite Jules to send us out.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks to the Barbie's Village and Westminster core teams that have been working so hard on this. We are really, ready for it to happen for you all and for the Future Generations Collaborative in particular. All right, friends, we have done it. We're done with our second month together. Go forth and organize. Share meetings. Make good conversations happen. Take some risks. And we will see you December 7th. And don't forget, if you have a core team, you'll be meeting in the meantime and in your companion to get some support. So reach out. We will see you in a month. Have a good night.